Welcome to the April 1st, 2025 work session of the Mayor and City Council of Hagerstown. The meeting is now called to order. First up on the agenda tonight, we have Mr. Mike Kiefer doing Sister City flag presentation, Hagerstown, Maryland, and Hagerstown, Indiana.
Thank you, Mayor McIntyre and council members. Each time I come before this body, I'm always tickled because I have something that I think is quite worthy for all of us to be a part of. When I was here the last meeting, and I had the young lady, Brielle Thamer, that was here. She's the young lady that designed the flag design, which we agreed upon was the best design for the Sister City flag. Sadly, her and her parents are en route here, but they're caught up in the traffic on 81, and we all know what that's all about. So that's unfortunate that she's not here. I was going to have her help unfold the flag to present it to you folks. What I will do, since she's not here, Ms. Burnett, if you would help me, what we're going to do is we're going to open the flag up, and then I'm going to ask the mayor and Mr. Alshire, since he's the new mayor, Mr. Alshire is the longest running council member, we are going to pass the flag to them. Follow me? So ladies and gentlemen, the design was approved. We took it to BJ's Customs. They outsourced it to a flag design, flag company, and they literally did a fantastic job. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you your official Hagerstown Sister City flag. When I go out to Hagerstown, Indiana next month, I will be taking the second flag and present to them. Now, originally, I thought my idea of a Sister City flag was unique. I come to find out not so much. There's quite a few sister cities that do have flags, but I guess we're the latest one. And I thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the council, residents of Hagerstown, Maryland. I hope you appreciate what we've done here. This is a page of history for both Hagerstown, Maryland, and Hagerstown, Indiana. We just made the footprint a little bit broader. So, Mayor, if I could have you up here, Mr. Schreier.
Should we go up this way? Face the,
Where at?
you know how we always over here?
Over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here, let's see.
Yeah. Everybody come on.
Okay, that'd be great. That would be great.
There.
There we go. There.
Come on.
Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Good smiles. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again, okay?
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Next up, we have Mr. Scott Nicewarner, Michelle Hepburn, Brooke Garver for the FY 2026 budget presentation and upcoming discussion schedule.
Good afternoon. Hello. Best time of the year.
It is, isn't it? Our favorite time, right? So this afternoon, we are going to, since you had all of a day to review and take in 500 plus pages of information, we thought we would just do a very high level overview and summary, hit on highlights or maybe things that are changing from the current fiscal year 25 budget to fiscal year 26. But before I kick it off and turn it over to Scott, just want to take a minute to walk you through our budget process. Several of you have heard this and you probably know it by heart, but October 31st, we file our audit for the end of a fiscal year. The beginning of November, Brooke and myself, we include the city administrator as much as possible as the calendar permits, but we sit with every department and review their current year. So in November, we sat and reviewed the first quarter of fiscal year 25. So the departments and we both knew where they were in actual compared to current year budget. Then at the end of November, they get the set of instructions in the calendar. December 1st through December 31st, the departments key and put in their initial budget requests. The beginning of January, the first week of January, and probably for about 3.5 weeks, first the departments, myself, Brooke, city administrator, sit and review the CIP requests that include 5-year projections. After that, we review with every department head the operating budget information. By February 1st, the hope and the goal is that we have a balanced general fund. That did not happen this year until February 14th. So we were a little bit behind. We started at a much larger deficit than we have had since I've been here in the past 14 years. So it was a hard budget season, but March 31st, we produced the book and the document. It's out available on our website. We have the hardbound copies in the mailbox. And then April and May is all about us presenting the city administrator's proposed budget. And the goal is, actually by charter, we have to have this adopted and approved, a budget for fiscal year 26 by May 30th, so that it's effective July 1 for the new fiscal year. Every single year we set and establish tax rates. So we adopt and pass the budget and then also simultaneously adopt and pass the tax rates. If this is not done, we have no tax rate to start July 1, which is, over 60% of all the revenue in the general fund. So again, very important that we hit these key dates. It does not mean that by the end of May, when this is adopted, that no changes can happen. That is not what takes place. So throughout the year, even if something has been approved and you approve the budget, just because there's a CIP or a project that's approved that's in here, it doesn't mean that we can go out and spend that money. We bring back every single thing that is over $25,000, and individually, this board takes a vote on that, whether that continues to go forward or doesn't. Also, if there is anything that needs adjusted or changed, if priorities shift, again, this legislative body can make those decisions throughout the year. So I don't want anybody to think every single line item as you approve and adopt stays the same from now until next June 30, 2026 when it ends, because we don't have that kind of crystal ball. But I think, Scott, you want to kick it off and cover some highlights?
Sure. And Michelle can correct me if I have anything that I say wrong. First, I want to thank Michelle and Brooke for the work they do in leading this effort to get this budget out. All of the accounting and finance staff that work pretty much 7 days a week for at least 2 months to get this budget out and get all the information together. And then also to the management team and their staff in getting their departmental information together into a format that I think is very informational and very straightforward for the public to understand. Also, we had hours of meetings to try to attack what Michelle said was a pretty daunting initial deficit. And I think we've got it down to a place where it's one that's manageable and beneficial to the community, Also considering the fact that we are in a pretty volatile and uncertain economic environment right now, where some major funding sources are in flux, and we needed to make some assumptions based upon that, as Michelle said, if we have to adjust later, we can always adjust. We were able to get balanced per the charter and present to you today this budget that actually has a surplus of $7,900. However, to get to that requirement, it's going to be necessary that we propose a 5.5 cent real property tax rate increase as part of this budget. This would bring a total increase of revenue between real property assessed value growth, and this is the third year of our triennial, so we will be reassessed starting in November and December of this year for the next 3 years. But it would bring that increase to 15.7% over the current FY '25 budget. This is,
And again, we just want to stop. That is total revenue. So that includes personal property as well as real estate.
right. This is the first tax rate increase since FY '18, and there's really 5 main factors as to why, as to where this increase is focused. First and foremost is a $3.2 million increase in FY '26 proposed budget to FY '25 within the Hagerstown Police Department. Salaries, benefits, and overtime contribute $2.8 million to that number due to the negotiated salary increases for existing staff, corresponding employer benefit increases, and 13 new full-time positions, 9 of those sworn, 4 of those civilian. This will put the number of sworn staff funded in the budget at 100, with 25 non-sworn staff within the department. This proposed increase is the direct result of the commitment of the previous administration and this administration to public safety and in getting more officers on the street. This include,
And so I see everybody turning while Scott. So so on your first page, at the very bottom, the bullet that says about the total property tax revenue and the reasons, he's providing the details behind that.
don't try.
You're not
don't
going to
try follow
necessarily
it.
see that. right
Yeah,
there.
we'll hit that, we'll start into all that next week.
Okay.
Yeah, don't try to follow that, because I'm all over the place. This would include money, this includes money for the enticement of lateral and comparative compliance officers to come to the city, as well as a strong commitment in our existing workforce and the fine work that they are already doing in the community. The community, including elected officials at all levels of government, made it loud and clear this was to be the number one priority of this administration. This budget reiterates that commitment. However, as you can see in the numbers, this increase cannot have been made simply by utilizing assessed value increases alone. A tax rate increase was necessary, and the purpose for it is very clear and necessary. I want to thank the department even more for going further in terms of not only making pay the only carrot in bringing officers to the department. The work on a new innovative schedule continues by the rank and file, and we look forward to implementing a schedule that provides a better work-life balance and puts more feet on the street when this current academy graduates and shift numbers allow. Secondly, the Hagerstown Fire Department budget is proposed to be $569,000 or $16 or 16.7% higher than FY '25 budget. $327,000 of this is also in salaries, benefits, and overtime. All other operating expense categories, save for one, have a proposed increase mainly due to the increased procurement costs associated with the department. Combined, public safety accounts for over $35 million of a total $71 million general fund budget paid primarily by the taxpayer. Third, information technology. The information technology department budget is increasing by 22% or $355,000 due to the operating costs for a new enterprise resource management system that was approved and purchased by the city council last year. This system will allow the city to better service our internal customers as well as our tax-paying and utility customers moving into 2026. Fourth, we are thrilled to have opened the new Hagerstown Fieldhouse and to see it flourishing. Due to the cost of construction, the debt service on this project adds $740,000 to our debt service over FY '25, and that's about a 37% increase.
So the debt service on just that specific bond is 1.1 million. Again, we did anticipate it and we included it in our projections last year at this time, but it's, like Scott
The
said.
bulk is the field house.
Yes, all of it is the field house.
Lastly, FY '26 expenses for legal services increased by 25% or 71,000 associated with the hiring of our federal lobbyists. Their knowledge has proven invaluable, especially over the past 3 months as we work to understand the ramifications of federal government actions on funding that we normally receive, especially through block grants. The delay, decrease, or elimination of CDBG funding would cast a significant challenge to the city. Now, let me touch on a couple other points related to this proposed budget. The city is not immune to external factors affecting the cost of operations. Our regular costs of supplies critical to the operations of the city have increased 3 to 4-fold over the last 2 years. The cost of healthcare is an overall $1.3 million increase over FY '25 due to union contract, it's an overall $1.3 million increase over FY '25 to the budget, which is mainly due to clauses in union contracts where we absorb 100% of those increases. This situation is extraordinary in today's business world, but we are obligated to maintain that through the union contract. Our pension costs are increasing dramatically, with police and fire retirement plan costs expected to increase by 14.5% or $306,000 in FY '26, and Maryland State retirement contribution rates increasing by 10.9% to a new rate of 13.3% of base salaries, while total cost is expected to increase by 22.8% or $273,000.
And I will caveat, the 273,000 is just in the general fund. In total, throughout the rest of the city and the other funds, the total state of Maryland is $486,000.
And I'm
Sorry,
focusing
I
on,
had
yeah, and
I
I'm
know
focusing
you are.
mainly on general fund here. Comparably, local governments are in an extremely competitive hiring environment. We have lost a couple of mid-level position hires over the past couple of months because when seeing the pay offer, they said it wasn't enough. We're finding it especially difficult to hire white-collar staff, with some higher skill positions having remained open for over a year and resulting in the use of contract labor for those operations. This budget maintains a 3% increase to the non-union pay scale, but realistically, this is still not enough. We need to be able to attract highly skilled workers to local government. We have 30 non-public safety staff that are eligible to retire today. Finding replacements for these staff or replacement to those that would move up into these positions will be difficult and lengthy. We will need to find monetary and non-monetary ways working within this budget to not only attract candidates, but to make those already here want to stay. Money remains in this budget for all of our economic development initiatives, including Invest Hagerstown, of which 1.1 million is in the budget. This has been a highly successful initiative in bringing businesses, especially small business, into the city and deserve to be maintained at its current level. It was my hope that I would not have to propose a tax increase, and Michelle can tell you that. We have gone round and round and round on this. However, I always stated that if one was ever proposed, the reasoning behind it would be defensible to the results it would generate. We feel this budget and this increased revenue through the tax increase does just that. There is nothing more important than to feel safe within the community in which you live. Having been a resident of this community for 39 years and raising a family here, I've always felt that public safety has been at the forefront of government's minds. Yes, crime happens in all towns, but when it happens in our town, it is important that we have the resources and the staff to ensure that the bad people are at least brought to stand justice. We do an amazing job of that now, but we can do more, and this budget puts us solidly on that path.
So, in the memo for the general fund, Scott hit just about every single bulleted item that we have there. I think the only thing that we didn't touch upon and key to the general fund budget was two things, both center around capital improvement and infrastructure projects. We maintained a $2.9 million pay go, which simply means current operating transfers. The current year revenue, current year expenses in fiscal year '26. In addition, we increased the amount of general fund balance reserves that we were going to use to 4.1 million. You'll see probably next week, if we get that far, or the week after, what all that encompasses in a grand total of funding for the projects, because that's just a small portion. There are multiple costs. One of the other things we just want to highlight, it's not necessarily a story in the fiscal year 26 budget and that you're going to see lots of money in lots of grant funds. It's the exact opposite. And so ARPA funding, we received 20.4 million. ARPA funding had to all be obligated and or spent by December 31, 2024. There were very strict definitions by the IRS of what obligated meant. We have all received, and when I say all, state, city, counties, tribal communities, anybody that received ARPA funding should have all received correspondence from the IRS last week. It was a very different tone, it was very stringent, and it included things like they would be sending out documentation to all those who had to repay ARPA. It included information of, we had to file information, we had to put in what our obligated was, and they may be coming back and asking for documentation to prove that what we have indicated was obligated was obligated. So the story for the city of Hagerstown for ARPA on the front page here is, you can see, basically fiscal year 25, we have already expended $7.2 million. And we literally, the last two bullets, we have 1.8 out of the total 20.4 that remains in current obligations that we anticipate will be spent. The only thing that's going to cross over into fiscal year 26 is we included 2 different locations for traffic signals, and the work is starting. There's going to be some delay for some supplies, so we anticipate that some of that is going to cross over into fiscal year 26. As Scott mentioned, he touched upon concerns. We wanted to highlight our CDBG, which is Community Development Block Grant Fund. It is our federally funded fund. Almost all of the money that and all of the expenses that we pay through there comes from our federal entitlement. We will not receive notification until mid to late April of what that amount's going to be. In the fiscal year 26 budget, because at the time when we prepared it, we weren't expecting maybe to see reductions that may be potentially happening. So we included $800,000, which is close to what our current year entitlement revenue is. If that gets reduced, we will have to be prepared. In CDBG, it would immediately impact public services, what we pay to other nonprofit public service agencies, because it is a maximum amount and it is a formula. So your current year entitlement dollars directly impact how much you can give to public service agencies. Also, the general CDBG admin budget would have to be looked at again because we would have to reduce and then probably immediately look at the public facility improvements. Economic redevelopment, Scott mentioned there, big story, 1.1 million that we're going to be transferring from the general fund over next year for Invest Hagerstown programs. And the electric fund, I know that we've talked about the rate changes and basically 2 different components for rates in the electric fund. One is wholesale power rates, which is merely a pass-through. The city contracts wholesale power. What we pay to the contractor is the fee that we pass on to the customers on that portion of the bill. Cost of service or retail rates is the portion that's remaining. It should cover all of the other costs that the city has. Infrastructure, salaries and wages. We hadn't changed that in decades. February 2025 was the first time in decades we changed it. However, the story right now is, as of today, the electric fund has a negative cash balance. Do not panic. Doesn't mean we cannot pay our bills. We can. The city has a pooled cash account. It means we got one bank account. All of the money flows in, right? It also means that accounting, audit, geeky standards, come June 30, I cannot reflect a negative cash balance in any fund. I can do a cash advance. Cannot do a loan, cannot do a stipend, cannot prop it up. So it has a negative cash balance of about a little over $700,000, which is better than where we were in February. We anticipate this to get better because now we have hit April. We always have a period, November through March, where, people struggle to pay the bills and there is moratorium in place. So by the time we get to April, the PSC lifts those moratoriums. Starting today and tomorrow, we're going to be really focused on that initiative to try to collect some revenue because it's.
It'll be good when the electric fund is discussed, being that most of yours first time doing this, to fully understand what is involved in the electric rate related to purchase power and then the retail rate. A lot of times people will get that confused, but because the purchase power rate can fluctuate based upon usage.
Correct.
So that'll be a good opportunity for Nathan to give you an explanation as to why that is.
And I will apologize because sometimes we say wholesale, sometimes we say purchase power, sometimes we say wholesale purchase power. And I just sat right here and I cut it off when I said wholesale. So I apologize for that. We get so used to our acronyms and shortcutting everything, kind of like when I throw out CDBG, I wanted to make sure everybody knew what I was talking about. Water fund, big story there. The current year rates for fiscal year 26 have already been approved and are about a 14% increase over our current budget. No changes in staffing, capital projects of 12.9 million. Water is looking in some of the projects to secure bond funding or loan funding from MDE for about 5 million, and that is to cover a portion of the transmission means project. You'll see in my memo, I put in parentheses a C number. It says C0166, probably means nothing to anybody. Get to that part in the budget book in the CIP section. Every single project has a number that starts with a C and will have an individual project sheet. So just something that you can reference later. If water, so water for fiscal year 26, there's an operating deficit anticipated of 2.1 million. And if all of the projects that's included in the 5-year projections for water occur with the rates that we had left in place in the projections, they could be at a negative cash balance in fiscal year 28. They have quite a lot of high dollar projects. And that's not new. We've been talking about them, right? And I know that there's new rate model being looked at and formulated, going to be various discussions. Things are going to happen through the summer. And then the plan would be that the consultant would come back the end of summer, beginning of fall, have that conversation with his body and what it looks like so we can have a path forward. Wastewater. So I have a typo. There's 2 typos. I cannot believe this. It is my fault. I'm sitting here. The first one is underneath wastewater. Fiscal year 26 rates have been already approved. They are not a 1% increase over current year. They are a 13% increase. Don't know what I did with the 3, but that was on me. No full-time staffing position changes here. And again, much like on water, it's anticipated that a MDE bond or loan in the amount of 10.5 will be issued next year. And that's to cover 2 different projects, a portion of wastewater treatment plant phase 1 improvements and a portion of pump station 13 reconstruction. Cash balance. The cash balance for wastewater looks strong in the 5-year projections if rates stay where they are and everything else stays on par. Want to talk about parking fund. We have no planned rate changes in fiscal year 26, no changes in staffing levels, but as everybody knows, Hub Garage 3rd deck was just added. What I didn't mention here was annual debt service for just that deck is $750,000 a year. It's a 25-year loan. First principal payment will be in fiscal year 26. So right now, cash is looking good. Even though we anticipate the parking fund itself will have an operating deficit in fiscal year 26 of almost 500,000, should still be okay with cash for another probably 2 years, maybe fiscal year 29. And again, as we talked and discussed adding the 3rd parking deck, we talked about the likelihood of negative cash balance happening in the continuation of coming back to the table, strategically thinking about rates, because the entirety of the parking system has to help cover the cost of that loan payment. So again, just things that we'll continue to monitor and watch. Stormwater fund, we have an updated 3-year cost rates that were approved. Will cover fiscal year 26, 27, 28. So rates are going to change from $36 per 1,000 square foot of impervious surface to $38 beginning this July. But the good news is with that cost rate, that $38 rate was held in place and constant for a guaranteed 3 years. That again helps people budget when we are able to do these cost rates and lock in price costs for 2 or 3 years. No change in staffing here. Capital projects of $5 million, and we're anticipating a surplus. So next week, we'll come back, we'll really dive into the general fund and have discussions. We'll walk through like navigation of the budget book. Hopefully, we can touch upon general fund CIPs, but if, we have discussion and lots of questions, that would be the following week. The plan then would be to touch on other governmental funds, followed by enterprise funds, and we can play it by ear. So as we sit here next week, if, we don't want to talk about capital CIPs and you're ready to talk about enterprise funds and you want to focus more there, electric, water, wastewater, stormwater, parking, we can change that up. We'll prepare a memo next week. We'll have some key pages and sections and charts, things that are a little bit easier because again, this is 500 pages and there's a lot of information to digest. It's a lot of information to prepare and do as well.
And it's important also for the new folks especially, is that this is a proposed budget. And the reason why we have this process is because there's going to be debate, usually is, on what should be there, what shouldn't be there. And what we will do is when a consensus of you would come up with, we don't want a 5.5 cent. We don't want A, okay? If you take
2.2
that
million.
revenue away, we've got to find out where the expenses are going to go. And when you look at a budget like what we have, and 60% of it is public safety, and you look at where the increases were not, which is basically in every other department within the city, it becomes extremely difficult to cut anywhere else but public safety, which is where we don't want, where staff would prefer not to cut at all. We go into this knowing that public safety is our main budget item. And again, that's why we went the route we did, because it is clear that public safety is the foremost minds of everyone, including yourselves, including us. And that's where we feel the emphasis needed to be with this budget.
So again, the proposed tax rate increase, what happens when we change real estate taxes? Corporate personal property is by default 2.5 times unless you set and establish totally separate rate scale for corporate personal property, which is extremely rare throughout municipalities and governments in the state of Maryland, and something that we've never done here at the city of Hagerstown. So if we raise real estate, that by default will raise corporate personal property. Typically, corporate personal property is a very small percentage of our overall total property revenue. But that 5.5 cent tax on real estate and the default tax increase on corporate personal property is $2.2 million. So as we talk about any changes, it's $2.2 million in revenue. So we'd either have to
For every
find new
penny.
revenue or take away expenses. So
For every penny of the tax rate, it's
$359,000.
$359,000. So for every penny you either take or you add, you want to go to 6, that would be $300,000, so that would be half a penny. Okay, if you want to drop it a whole penny, you're dropping $359,000 that we've got to fund.
And so our goal is May 13, we'd have the public hearing and introduce ordinances for both the tax rate establishment and set the tax rate as well as the new fiscal year 26 budget. And then the following week on May 20th, adopt. Both of those weeks, the 13th and the 20th, we still plan to cover budget topics and conversation before the final adoption. This would permit us an extra week, right? So I'm going to say, Michelle, regular session is May 27th. Yes, it is. But if we wait until May 27th to adopt and there is any change that has to happen, we literally have 3 days. So again, this is the schedule that we've kept and adhered to the last several years to give everybody time to digest. I will say, look, it's 500 pages. I cannot imagine a single person could open this budget book with 500 pages and say, I disagree with this, right? There is going to be something, there are things in here that I might not necessarily agree with, right? But it's the best of the recommendations we can do for the overall health of the fund. General fund, Scott touched upon it, but I just want to hit, because I made mention on every single fund, and then I'm going to let us go. 17 full-time position increases in the general fund in the fiscal year 26 compared to 25. 16 of those 17 positions have already been approved. So they included the 4 civilian staff for police, 9 full-time sworn officers, 2 additional customer service representatives, converting 1 part-time position in community engagement to full-time. That happened after the fiscal year 25 started. So the only one that's in the budget that has not yet come to the table, been discussed and or approved, is an additional 1 full-time planner position. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. It is in the budget. It has not been approved. So it would still, even if the budget is approved with that in there, it's still something that would separately have to come before the body. On page, if you look, we attached to this memo and we put, Donna Spickler was so wonderful to me. She put this out, so now it's out on our website. But the first 51 pages are the same 51 pages you're going to see in the overview section in the budget book. Honestly, it is a high level. It hits so many funds. It has so much information. 51 pages is much easier to digest than 500. It's not going to give you all the details, but it's going to give you a great overview. But on page 40, I had a person who's already found, every year we plant one little thing in there just for somebody to catch. I wish. On page 40, you will notice at the very top, I have a line for police, I have a line for fire. If you come down, and we literally, when we do little charts, we like to notate the things that have changed the most. So we give you number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And number 2, we say fire is anticipated. Scott mentioned 569,000. That is correct. It should read or 5%. It's a 5% higher, just like the chart says, just like is in the details everywhere else in the book. It's just typo that I missed. Dollars is correct. So we'll be back next Tuesday and every Tuesday thereafter. Unless you have additional questions.
I definitely have questions
Okay.
down the road.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, next up, we got Scott again, for planning code administration organizational structure change.
All right, it would have been 31 retirees ready to go at any minute, but we already have 1 that's going at any minute, so, which is necessitating this part of the agenda now. This will be a reorganization of the Planning and Code Administration Department, known as PCAD, with the retirement of Kathy, who was the director of the group. This reorganization is expected to provide better efficiency within the core operations of the department, as well as improve the communications and customer service between the operations and the communities within the city that they serve. The new structure will be, and there's an attached organizational chart that's part of the packet. First of all, permits and inspections. This department will move to the engineering department and now be referred to as the Engineering and Permits Department. This structure, as it was before, I've got 2013. I believe I was corrected. It was 2010 when this originally happened. And this group will report to the city engineer, Jim Bender. The planning department will now be reporting to Jill Thompson, and she is the director of what will be the newly named Department of Planning and Economic Development. Steve Bachmiller will be responsible for all planning and zoning operations as the deputy director in that department. Lastly, neighborhood services. This division will be part of a new department that will be named the Department of Housing and Community Development. This group will be led by Amanda Gregg, will be the Chief Housing and Community Development Officer. Community development will be moved from DCE, from the Economic Development Department into this group. Margie Joe will continue to supervise this operation, which deals primarily with community block grant funding and various grants and loans done through that department. Neighborhood services will continue to be overseen by Paul Falk and includes all of the neighborhood services inspectors that currently report to him. A new position has been created entitled Housing and Development Liaison, and Sue Kyler will be in that position. This position will act as a point of contact for developers, contractors, small business owners as a one-stop shop for information related to all aspects of new building or rehabilitation construction process. Sue will also work to proactively meet with developers of new, not started projects or very recently started projects to ensure that there's an understanding of what is required for specific new construction or rehab projects. She will also work cross-departmentally between housing and community development and the inspections team to ensure customer service and communication needs are met. What we anticipate this position is not to be like the complaint department. That's not what this department is going to be. One thing we have heard is that there are too many developers out there that are confused by what they're looking at when it comes to what their requirements are to either get a building permit, plumbing inspection, or something to that effect. Sue, we already have a process in place where those newly established accounts where a new business or a rehab project is going in, Sue can be notified of that, and she can proactively reach out with information that tells the person, here is what you're going to need to do during this process. Yes, you will need a permit for this, this, and this. No, you will not need a permit to do this type of modification. And through that process, if someone would have a question as, hey, I'm getting ready to put this water heater in, what should I do? That information should already have been provided to them that they will know what to do. Yes, you would need a permit for that particular unit to go in. Hopefully what this will do is help to eliminate the perceived gotchas that occur, that folks seem to think occur during this process. And Sue is a former neighborhood services inspector. She's very aware of the code, and she has great customer service skills, and we think she's going to be a great asset in this department. The other thing this department will do is part of your goals and strategy 2 had to do with blight and urban revitalization. We will look at this department to, one, as it's stated, proactively communicate with the community on what's needed, but we're also going to go back and look through some of the main issues related to new development and rehabilitation and see, could this be worded different? Could this letter be done differently? Could this process be done differently? We're going to have communications with a group called Cities Work and people I met at NLC this past year that would come in and do a free evaluation of, for example, what it takes to start a new business in Hagerstown and work through the process of how do you get a permit? How do you get a business license? Things that might not be totally within our purview, but whether that process is efficient enough, where things could get better, things we might want to add to the process. They did this for the city of Philadelphia, and it cut their time to get a business from concept to grand opening from 6 months to 2 months. So they do make a difference. Obviously, Philadelphia is a little bit different in size than what we are when it comes to staff, but that's another thing they have to consider, is what kind of staffing do we have that would allow us to meet the needs of the community. This position, Amanda's position, will report directly to me. So I can make sure that I have a good understanding of the issues that they are dealing with and the issues that, that Amanda seems to be coming up, time and time again. We're still working through some details. This doesn't go into effect until the 14th of April. We all know change can be sometimes difficult within an organization, so we're going to try to do the best we can to mitigate the mental anxiety that comes with that. But between Jill and Jim Bender, they're going to do a great job with the department they have, and I think Amanda's going to do a fine job as an experienced realtor, a developer, former developer herself that understands the business and understands the process. That we're gonna be able to hopefully improve the perception of customer service within this operation. Any questions from y'all?
I have a couple comments.
Yep.
One, thank you for looking into this to make these structural changes. As the public's aware, we had a similar conversation during last administration, but I think this approach is much more cleaner, more streamlined. And this structure, like to your point, goes back to improving customer service within the departments. And I'm really, really happy to hear about the liaison position that we mentioned that could help with communication between developers and how to start a business and what documentation is needed. Because I think that has been some of the concern that we've heard is, we weren't expecting this, or we were told to change this at some point in time during the process. And thank you for mentioning the City Works, because one of my first conversations I had with Paul at the beginning of the last term was something similar, but like an audit perspective and my quality 9-to-5 job mindset. But I think that would be helpful to see those gaps from the someone who doesn't, isn't part of the day-to-day operations, and see like exactly like if I'm going to start a business here, what does that look like, to help weed out those gaps and help propose some solutions that can help the process. So I'm so thankful that you put this together, and kudos.
I'm going to jump on what Councilwoman said, the creation of Sue Eiler's position. The key word in there is she's going to proactively reach out to businesses. Not only our businesses can come and ask, but she's going to reach out as well. And I think it's a great step.
One of the things we've always wanted to do, and these guys just have never had a chance to do it because they are always out in the field, is that if someone would just say, hey, it's my first time doing it, here, I've gone through the process, can someone just come take just a quick look? What do I need to do in here? And that person can go out and say, well, here's where you need to look. You might want to look at those windows. We have a code related to, sprinklers, and just give them a little bit of a forewarning. Because as they go through the planning process and they work with the inspectors to do the site plans and everything, it's important. One of the biggest things we always hear is that site plans are put in, comments are provided, and no one ever reads the comments. Well, we're going to make sure that one of the things she stresses to a developer is that when you get a drawing back, read the comments. The comments are there to help you. And you need to, if you don't understand, then ask what you need to do. Those are the kind of things where communications, because these guys are in the field and girls are in the field pretty much all day. Sometimes that may slip through the cracks, and this will provide a way to maybe make that communication better.
Oh, and for the public's awareness, this structure does not require a charter change, correct?
Now,
I also want to say, just coming from a small business standpoint, this is really good. This makes a lot of sense. It just puts a lot of things in perspective. So also with Sue's position, is it going to, because I know we talked about something like this before at the beginning when we were trying to just put everything into motion. Will this position allow small businesses to maybe move forward, even if other things are still needed?
that's part of something we're going to have to talk about.
Okay.
Because there's always going to be instances where you'd like to be able to move forward, but if it's a life safety issue, obviously that's
Right.
not going to happen.
Right.
So those are things we're gonna have to talk about as to, you want to be consistent in what you provide, and direction that you give. We don't want anyone to come back and say, well, you let them do it and they only got this, so why aren't you letting me? We have to avoid that because that creates nothing more, nothing more than tension that's
So-
unnecessary.
So it'll be more of a break, like, you're getting ready to start your business, and it'll be more of a breakdown of what you need,
Right,
so you're not back and forth
Right.
with Sue or,
unless you
when-
have questions.
Right,
Yeah,
but
unless
like,
have
you
questions,
have
right.
this kind of blueprint that kind of guides you on the way, so it's more straightforward, more clear cut.
As much as, yes, as much as it can be, which is, there's always going to be those areas where there's going to be questions in minds. Do I need a permit for that? Do I need an inspection for that? We always need to keep those in mind because each situation is going to be a little different. But overall, the consistency has to remain on how the code is applied and when it's applied.
And City Works, is that the name, that's a company, or is that what
They
you're
are
gonna call
part,
this?
they are part of a company.
Okay.
They are part of an overall comfort, the name's escaping me right now.
Okay.
But they do these services for cities when it comes to process review.
I like that. Good job.
Can I ask one more question?
Mhm.
Whoever the customer is, are they going to have assurances that whatever we say, and something in writing, or are we going to have it in writing that they're able to, there's no back and forth at the end of a project just in case something does happen?
We can talk about doing that. I think that would be something to work forward.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Like an accountability piece.
Well, just if, if.
Just so everybody's clear.
Right.
I mean, you want to make sure that we're both on the same page, and by signing off of it, then, we pretty much do that now. But it would be perhaps a more formalized way to do it.
Okay.
And this could possibly cut a business owner's timeframe of opening.
That would be, an opportune thing to have
Ideal, yeah.
happen would be to get them open as quick as we can. If they know what they need out of the gate and what they need to do out of the gate, it's a lot easier to move forward than it would be if they're having to stop and think, well, do I need to do this? Do I have to call in? And then have to call in and somebody has, talk them through it.
I think also a lot of times they could have everything done and it's just hearing back from the city. So
Could
they're
be,
just
yep.
waiting in limbo, like, I can't officially open until I get the word from the city, but everything else could be in.
And that's where it's important to understand what needs to happen before they can get that occupancy permit. And again, like I said, these guys, we're understaffed now. I think 3 people in neighborhood services. We have 1 inspector for each, and we have one that kind of roams. Paul even does some back there, even though he's not in that department, to try to get through. That's why I kind of go back to what I was saying during the budget presentation, is that it's extremely hard to work to hire in this market. And we really are going to have to look and reevaluate skill sets and pay structures and work-life balance to be able to compete with those, not just, like I said, not just in pay.
And I would love to get like a progress report later in a year after.
I'll do one each
everything's-
quarter with you.
Even
After
better.
April 14th, we'll come back each quarter and tell you how it's going.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions for Scott?
With it, you said, so this won't be into motion till April 14th.
April
correct?
14th.
So, for example, I know we keep using Sue, for example. So is that, since this is a whole new position for her, is this like from now to April 14th, is this kind of like her training on it? or-
Being that she's already experienced
Yeah.
in the code and neighborhood services, we don't have to worry about much of
Okay,
that
gotcha.
training. I think what we're going to be working on now is simply what do we want, how do we want this to roll? When it comes to how do we want to get her notified, or how can we get her notified? How does she prioritize what she, where she goes and what she does? And getting the information available to her that she can provide to the folks she goes and talks to.
Any other questions? All right. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, next up, we have Mr. Jim Bender, the Safe Street for All Safety Action Plan Draft Final Report.
Hi, Jim.
I believe it's an update. That's no problem. I think it's an old thing. It might be. Working on, all right.
So good afternoon. Just wanted to give another update on the safety action plan that the city and our consultant team has been working on. Sorry to do it today because Michelle dropped 500 pages on you and then I put an 80-page draft report in the packet. But what I've got up on the monitors is a pared down summary that we actually used at a stakeholder meeting that we just had last week. So I'm not going to go through the whole draft report, but I'm just going to try to hit the highlights by going through this presentation. So just the background, the city applied for a grant through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act back in 2023, and we were successful. We were granted $160,000 to prepare this safety action plan. And the reason that we were interested in doing this is we knew that there was going to be another opportunity to apply for another round of funding after, in the next fiscal year. And to apply for that funding, which would go toward implementation and actually doing projects, you first have to have an approved safety action plan. So we wanted to get this plan approved, and then just over the weekend, I guess it was either on Friday or it was Monday this week, the announcement of the next round of this funding came out. So we are on target to try to apply for this next round of implementation funding. Applications need to be submitted by the end of June. So we are looking to try to get this action plan approved by the mayor and council at the end of May so that we have time to complete that application and move forward. So just looking through the presentation, it took a team to do this. It was city staff. It was representatives from our local metropolitan planning organization, Matt Molinex and Michaela McDonough. And the MPO actually has a consultant team on board already. It's headed up by Michael Baker International and some sub-consultants. And they were able to jump in pretty quickly, even though this safety action plan was not something that they had planned on doing. They were able to jump in and work on this plan for the city. So it's a really great team, really talented, dedicated people that we work with on this. So what is a safety action plan? The purpose of it is to eliminate traffic deaths and serious injuries by 2050. And that's a national goal that's also been adopted by the state of Maryland. The purpose of the plan is to identify some of these areas within the city's transportation network where you have a higher number of accidents or serious injuries. And as I said, by going through this planning process, it will allow us or put us in position to apply for additional funding, which we plan on doing. So in putting the plan together, the team went back and looked at the last 5 years of accident data in the city. And now this is, they look at it, it's divided into interstate accidents and non-interstate, because we do have portions of the interstate that are within city limits, but they pull those crashes and accidents out so that they're not counting those. It's mainly just on local city streets that we're looking at. So from 2019 to 2023, there were 3,800 non-interstate crashes in Hagerstown. 114 of those resulted in either fatality or a serious injury. And you can see on that chart how it's distributed between cars or vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcyclists. So there are a couple key parts or key findings of the plan that we're going to hit on as we go forward. And just to give you background again on the schedule that we, what this process has looked like. We started back in August of 2024, actually before that, but in August of 2024, we had our first stakeholder meeting, and that was with a wide range of local people that are interested in transportation issues. So that was Hagerstown Police Department. It was Washington County Public Schools. It was Washington County Transit. Just a lot of people, some of our fire and safety staff as well. A lot of people that depend on our transportation network, and they see issues out there that, sitting in my office in City Hall, I may not see them, but they're out on the streets every day looking and experiencing some of these issues. So it's important to get them involved. Had our first stakeholder meeting with them in August of last year. And then did a public outreach survey, which I'll talk about in a minute, which got an overwhelming response from the general public. Lots of comments and concerns were submitted to us. We digested those and rolled them into sort of a pre-draft final plan. Reviewed those results with the stakeholders again back in November. And since then, we've been working toward developing this final plan. And we just had our third and final stakeholder meeting last week. And as I said, we are putting the draft plan out for public comment starting tomorrow. It'll be out for comment for 30 days. And then I'll be coming back in May to give you the results of that public comment period, presenting you with a final report, and be asking the city council to approve a resolution that, I guess, confirms our commitment to trying to reduce or minimize the number of fatalities and serious injuries here in Hagerstown. There's information here on the grant program, which I'm not going to go through. The grant criteria lists key points that we have to have in our action plan, and our team has done a good job of making sure that we hit all of those. As I said, we did a public outreach survey. We had over 1,900 responses to that survey, which asked people to identify, are there dangerous streets that you travel on? What safety issues do you see? What are your concerns? Lots of comments. Can tell you distracted driving was by far the highest response rate. A lot of people feel that that's cause of many of the accidents that we have here in town. And we also were requesting that the people responding to that survey give us your ideas on what we can do to address some of these things. So they submitted recommendations and suggestions that we could try. So took the results of the accident data and combined it with the public survey comments and developed what's called a high injury network map, which kind of identifies the key corridors or streets within the city where we've got issues, whether it's speeding, accidents, pedestrian issues. And so by identifying that network, and you can see here, there's a list of the top 10 high injury networks in town. It's based on a combination of crashes, it's based on fatalities, it's based on what the public in the public survey, things that they were pointing out. So they're listed there. I'll talk a little bit more about a few of them here in a second. So then the team decided that we were going to do sort of a take a two-prong approach in putting this report together. One was to look at some things that are going on citywide that we need to address, and then honing in on some specific streets or corridors where there were issues going on. So from the citywide side, I think the three areas that we identified that we wanted to work on were signalized intersections. The vast majority of accidents, at least in the downtown area, occur at signalized intersections. And there are a number of reasons for that, but that's kind of a priority area for us going forward to look at. Mid-block pedestrian crossings is another one. People not crossing at intersections or marked crosswalks, they're crossing in the middle of a block, and that causes issues because drivers are not necessarily expecting somebody to be crossing in the middle of the street, which leads to accidents and near misses. And obviously speeding, we had a lot of complaints in the survey about speeding on, especially in certain streets in the city. So that's a citywide concern that we want to work through. On the traffic signals, there are some things we can do. We would look at changing the signal timing where we can to make traffic flow a little bit better. There are some physical things we can do with the traffic signals. If you look up at a traffic signal in the red, green, and yellow light, a lot of newer signals have a backplate behind that, a reflecting backplate behind those lights. And the purpose of that is it's supposed to catch your attention. It has reflectors on it. It's supposed to catch your attention and draw your eyes up more to the signal so it just doesn't blend into the scenery. So that's a fairly inexpensive countermeasure that we could do. A number of things that I think that we can look at with the signal system to try to improve it. Number one is if we go for this additional funding and we're successful, we have a number of old, outdated traffic signals that we're going to have to replace. So we're hoping that if we get implementation funding, that's something that we could focus on, replacing some of those old signals that are at the end of their life. Mid-block pedestrian crossings, some of the easy things that you can do are improving crosswalk markings at places where they should be, at intersections, making sure that they're high visibility and that you're going to make the public feel safer, pedestrians will feel safer at those crossings and maybe less likely to use a mid-block crossing if they know that they've got a really well-marked and safe crossing at an intersection not too far away. And there are a number of other countermeasures dealing with the mid-block crossing that we can talk about as well. Speeding, obviously, is an issue. These countermeasures, they talk about doing different things. They said you could add speed cameras, you could do more enforcement, you could use temporary speed boards that would display the speed of vehicles traveling down the streets and catch people's attention and hopefully get them to slow down. So speeding is a difficult problem to attack because it's pervasive, and especially on certain streets that are really wide, like Oak Hill Avenue, or coming in on Potomac Avenue from the north end. Those really wide streets make people feel comfortable going faster than maybe the speed limit says they should be. It's part of our overall plan. One of the countermeasures is traffic calming, where you narrow streets to make them feel less comfortable. So that has an effect on drivers. So that would be one thing with speeding. The other prong that we looked at, we're identifying some specific corridors where we knew that there were issues and coming up with countermeasures or proposals on that. One of the corridors that we looked at was actually two streets. It's Locust Street and Mulberry Street. They both one-way streets. One runs north-south, the other runs south-north. They're very similar streets. They're narrow. They have bike lanes. There's parking on one side of the street. Signalized intersections for the most part going up through there. But there are more accidents than on those streets than you would see or expect to see on other streets in the city. So they kind of honed in on that. One of the countermeasures that was recommended is, this is going to sound a little counterintuitive, but they said we ought to look at removing some of the traffic signals on those corridors. And the reason is that what they were seeing in the citizen comments and looking at the data is that people get impatient. If they come up to an intersection and it turns red and they're sitting there for 20 or 30 seconds and there's no cross traffic on the side streets, they get upset, and then as soon as that light goes green, they're going to put their foot down and they're going to try to go as fast as they can to make up for the time that they left. So what this study said is, go out and look at those intersections. Maybe some of those would work better if they were four-way stops, because then you're only waiting, if you come up to a stop sign, you're only waiting maybe 8 seconds for a car on one of the side streets to go, and then you would be able to go. So that's one of the things that they proposed as a countermeasure for Locust and Mulberry. The other corridor they looked at was Antietam Street. And this is one where I need to stop here and say that all of these countermeasures that they're proposing are geared towards safety. This is a safety action plan. So it's trying to cut down on accidents and it's trying to make people safer. However, there are things that, countermeasures that they came up with that they probably are a very good thing from a safety standpoint, but from an operational standpoint, they're really hard to manage. And one of the countermeasures they came up with for Antietam Street is making it one-way east from up at Washington Square, basically the whole way through town to Cannon Avenue. Because they looked at the data and said you have places where you've got head-on collisions because the street is so narrow. They really feel that the dry bridge crossing under Prospect Street, they feel it's not wide enough to have two-way traffic under it, even though it's been that way for a long time. So that was their recommendation, make Antietam Street one-way eastbound. But when you think about that, that really doesn't work very well. You know, we have a brand-new Hub City parking garage, but the only way to get to it then really would be to come down Antietam Street from up at Washington Square, because you can't get to it from Potomac Street if it's one-way eastbound. You know, so it's things like that that I think we need to weigh. The plan makes good points. Whether we would actually implement some of these things, I think is going to take some thought. But that's what they came up with for Antietam Street. Next steps, like I said, the draft plan is going to be posted on the city's website tomorrow, and it's going to be up for public comment for 30 days. We'll wrap that up, take into consideration any comments that we receive in early May. Then I'll be coming back at a work session in May with the final reports. And we'll be, you know, at the regular session meeting in May, we'll be asking the council to approve a resolution to adopt the final plan. So that's what this whole process has been about, and we're close to the end of it now. So if you have any questions on any of that, please feel free.
So in this report, there, and I'm going to use a selfish example to I guess, make my point here. There are comments from stakeholders of the confusion associated with Park Circle. And I've been here long enough to know, sit through what, 3 iterations of Park Circle. I think the last of which was the most grand of those iterations for improvements to Park Circle for traffic flow. And at that time, I had some concern with the changes that we were making. And if I recall correctly, it was indicated that we really don't have any significant collision data, historical data at Park Circle. There are certainly near misses because of the confusion that folks enter when you have, you know, all of what's going on there, but there aren't actual collisions. And here's the selfish part. So I've witnessed 3 accidents within the 3-block stretch of my house on that part of Virginia Avenue in the last 3 months. And here's why. We have a new development that only has about a dozen or so homes in it so far. It's supposed to be 450 homes at the end of the day that access Marion Street and Armstrong. And what happens between Marion Street and Armstrong, for those that aren't aware, is the city lights stop. So it becomes dark about halfway through that stretch. And you're coming uphill and you're entering the dark, or you're coming from the dark and entering down into the city. And most folks, you know, come down to the city faster than they leave. And now you have this main entrance on Armstrong, which for geography's sake, because the old trolley system used to run along that side of Virginia Avenue in and out of town, you had to build these 6 to 7 foot retaining walls to the 2 houses that abut Armstrong, which limit the ability for a car to see when it's pulling out into the roughly 16,000 cars that go up and down Virginia Avenue every day. So they either can do that at Armstrong in the dark, with a poor line of sight, or they can do it at Marion, which is a good line of sight, but it's where cars are either speeding up to leave or, breaking down to come in. And Marion's actually squeezed in a lot more because there's actually sidewalks there. So the city street sidewalk system ends, the city light, street light system ends, and you're just beginning with this development. And here's the point that I have. When I read this collision data within this report, it cites as number 8 on page 20, Virginia Avenue, but it cites it from the city boundary, which is about a half a block past my house, all the way down to Key Street, which is on the other side of the circle. And I guess what I want to know is, let's say that there's a dozen accidents in that stretch of road, that 1.4 miles of road. I want to make sure that as part of this effort, aside from the stakeholder concerns of things like near misses and the complexities of Park Circle, that we're saying, okay, where is the actual collision accident data happening specifically in the 1.4 mile, and why at that specific intersection, that specific location? Not, we're going to look at Virginia Avenue in total and say, we can do a dozen improvements from city boundary to Key Street, half a dozen of which may not really be necessary because you're not experiencing the level of traffic or pedestrian safety concerns that you are in very specific intersections on specific nodes of those streets. So Oak Hill may be a really long, broad street, but there may only be like 2 intersections in that entire length of street that are the real concerns, that you have real data that says it's happening right here at this intersection the most. And I guess that's what I want to make sure that we get out of that, so that there isn't this huge plan to say, we're going to improve this street for its entire length with all these things, when really we only needed to do these 2 or 3 things at these 2 or 3 specific locations, you know what I mean? To exhaust those limited resources, and address the actual safety concerns that are happening.
So I guess the way I'm looking at this safety action plan is they used very specific crash data to, looked at locations, and they looked at individual accidents and as much as they could map those out. And that helped them to, identify corridors, mainly that, like the Virginia Avenue corridor is one that has to be done. But I think also they were looking at this safety action plan as more of a sort of a comprehensive view of the city without getting into specific intersections or specific places where they said, yes, we need to address something here on Virginia Avenue near Marion Street. I think that the next step in that is to take the information that's in this plan, and then before we would go to implementation, or before we would look at developing specific projects, that's the next step, is to drill down from the level that's in this report down into exactly what you're talking about. Let's identify the key locations and come up with specific projects to deal with those.
And I guess that gets to my second point, which is if you go to page 29 and 30, and it speaks directly to those corridor, primary corridors that it selects, Locust Street and Mulberry Street and Antietam Street, right? And we're already hearing, as you've indicated here this evening, this notion that we make Antietam Street one way because of a host of different opinions and, perspectives on the matter. But I look at those and I see 313 collisions at Locust and Mulberry. And I see 154 collisions at Antietam Street. And then if you go to the data on the right, which to me is the most important, which is of that collision activity, what percentage and what raw number are of a nature that they are a significant public safety concern. And I guess for me, I'll use Oak Hill as an example. Let's say at Oak Hill at a specific intersection, let's say you had 40 incidents on Oak Hill. let's say of that 40, 12 were happening at a specific intersection, and of that 12, 7 were of a significant public safety nature. Like, to me, I would think I'd want to focus those resources on those nodes and addressing those specific nodes within those areas, rather than saying, I'm going to pick these 2 long corridors because I got a lot of collisions here of a minor nature, and do this holistic approach to addressing these minor collision activity versus those node-specific areas where you're having that major public safety collision concern.
Right. So I think too, the other way to look at this plan is it's throwing out Antietam and Locust and Mulberry as priority corridors. But I think that the other part of this is the countermeasures that they talk about, the things that you can do to address issues on those corridors can be applied to many other streets or corridors within the city. So yes, they are, I remember when we were talking about this, the corridor part of this and trying to figure out, okay, which corridors do we want to look at? And there were a number of them to choose from. And on that list, I know that Church Street and East Avenue, but mainly Church Street was certainly one of them. Burhan's Boulevard was certainly one. Parts of Salem
I think we have a
Avenue.
bad issue with where Mayor McIntyre used to live at Mealy Parkway and Worth Potomac near the Kareem Memorial. There seems to be a lot of accidents there. A lot of it is because they said it's a state road or whatever, but what can we do in the city to have less accidents there?
So I think, I hear what you're saying about kind of how did these specific corridors get selected, and why aren't we looking at some of the specific problem areas? I guess I would say, again, that's to me sort of the next step as we move forward, and taking some of the things that they're talking about doing in these corridors and looking at applying those in other locations as well.
So we do have the database to pull like those specific zones.
We do. Some of the location data is better than others. Mainly it's pulled from police reports. And one thing that I think we're moving toward, but we're not quite there yet, is in today's world, with smartphones and GPS equipment, you can tag a location. You can,
Right.
locate this. In some cases, the police reports don't do that. They will give you a more approximate location. They'll say accident on Washington Street between Prospect and Jonathan. Or not specifically get you to that level where you can say, right here is the problem. But I think that as technology changes, I think the chiefs here, I think that that's something as they move forward, I think a lot of that data is going to get automatically collected. So we're going to know if there's an incident or an accident, it happened right here within 5 feet of this location.
I guess that's for me, like, my primary focus, at least my opinion, is that at the end of the day, we focus on those nodal locations that are those primary concerns versus, and I don't mean to say this to belittle, the objective here at all, but that it's not sort of like a corridor-wide beautification project that helps, this long corridor that doesn't have the same severity of those nodal issues at those specific locations that I'd want to focus those resources toward.
Right. And I've already had conversations with Matt Mullinex, who's the executive director of our local MPO. And he is actually, in his budget for next year, has set aside, I believe, $50,000 for, at this point, some undefined study or additional work that can be done in Hagerstown based on things that are in this action plan. And so that may be an opportunity to drill down into some of this data, just like you're talking about, and get, I guess, a little deeper in the weeds with okay, where specifically do we have issues and what can we do to try to address them?
I don't want to look on a page like page 12 and you see this note that says safety issues, highlighted in the salmon color, and that be a reflection of the fact that folks are confused and concerned at times going through Park Circle. If Park Circle isn't the spot on Virginia Avenue where the actual collisions are, and safety.
Yeah, I hear you. I think it's, it's hard to, with the online survey, and all the comments, you do have to, I think, use some discretion in reviewing those and thinking about, why is somebody making this comment? And is it legitimate? Is it a valid concern, or is it just, people don't like roundabouts, or they're not comfortable with roundabouts? So that's spurring a comment. So I think you're right. I think that we need to vet those comments and need to drill down into it.
I think you have more near misses at Chicks than what you have on the Circle itself. We all have our own, we're all gonna have our own places.
For the comments, how are they going to be submitted? It's going to be emails to you, or is there going to be another portal?
It's going to be emails. This is actually being hosted by both the MPO and the consultant team. So they're going to have their own portal where they're taking comments, but from the city's website, it's going to have my email address. And so those comments from the city website will come to me, comments from the MPO's website or the portal will go to them, and then we'll combine them.
I'm glad to see that there were over 1,900 comments, because I personally told people, get out of Facebook comments and actually direct that to this platform so they're captured
Right.
correctly.
Matt said that over the past 12 years and the countless surveys they've done, this was by far the largest response they ever got. He was
Good.
expecting maybe 600 or 700 comments and got almost 3 times that many.
Good. People are paying attention, so kudos.
Anything else for Jim? All right. Thanks,
Thank
Jim.
you.
Thank you, Jim.
Absolutely. City Administrator.
I'd ask that as you go through the budget book here over the next week, if you come across any questions or anything that you need some clarification or explanation for, please reach out to me. And what that will do is, one, maybe I can get your question answered, but two, would help us know for the next discussion we have, points to specifically bring up and address for each of you. So please don't hesitate to send us any questions. That's all.
Councilwoman Bell.
I don't have it.
Councilman Alshire.
I do. I have one item, and I didn't bring this up during the budget discussion, but I think it is important to note as we move into our budget deliberations, both for the new folks at the table as well as the average citizen at home. And I say this because, and I think I've said this before, I sort of like to look at the budget each year and all of the different attributes of the budget, all of the stuff that we collect money for and that we spend the public's money on. How does it affect the average citizen at the end of the day? And so as you go through and you look at your budget, I would just point out a couple of things. I know that we've talked about the possibility of a tax rate adjustment this evening. We've talked about the adjustment to water and sewer rates, the fact that electric utility billing cost, where we buy the electric and sell it, is going up, even a minor adjustment such as the stormwater management fee. I like to put this in the perspective of what does that mean to me come July 1, when I've got to pay my new tax bill, when I've got to pay these new utility charges, when I've got to pay these additional fees. What does that mean to me at the end of the day? And I put it in this term for myself that may reflect sort of the average homeowner out there. So I pay about $1,400 a year in city property tax. So if you add about 5.5 cents on the tax rate, That's about $77 more that I would pay a year, or about $6.50 more a year. And I have to say, okay, what am I getting for that additional $6.50 a year? And I think we've heard loud and clear that the citizens want our public safety services increased. And we were struggling, frankly, at retaining and attracting new officers. We made adjustments to that. That makes up a big part of it. That makes up about 60% of that, or about $46. So that's $77. About $45 to $50 is going to be spent on increases in public safety services. Other things, like we talked about the field house, that makes up about a penny and a half, or about $12. So if you drive by the field house, if you go in the field house, if you use something like that, some type of public amenity, you say, okay, that cost me about another $12 a year, or about $1 a month. If we talk about, where we can identify these funds in the budget for savings, we talk about one-time things, such as the $1.3 million that we invest in the Invest Hagerstown program. So you have to ask yourself, of that $1.3 million, how much you're willing to sort of cut yourself off at the knees when it comes to economic development that you want to see happen in the city, and you want to see to bolster some of that investment, because that makes up a portion of it. So, for about $20 or $30 a year, you're getting that additional investment of millions of dollars, of reinvestment, especially in older properties in the town and throughout the town for that fiscal year. We hear terms such as 14% increases in water and 14% increases in sewer, and we say, okay, how does that affect me? As an average homeowner, that affects me at about another $30 to $35 a quarter, or about $10 a month. I would love to sit and tangibly say to the average citizen, here's what you're getting in water and sewer for that. But I say again, owning a water and sewer system is like owning a used car you're trying to fix while you're driving it down the road. There are millions and millions of dollars worth of continual infrastructure upgrades that have to be made to that system nonstop, year in and year out. They only get more over time. And so, we're investing in improving that infrastructure so that we can deliver clean water and we can properly treat sewer. That's just a fact. We talk about stormwater management, that fee's going up. Somebody could say, oh, that's going up 5%. What does that mean? That's about $2 a quarter, I believe. So less than $1 a month. And that generates funding because we're mandated to implement stormwater management projects by the state and federal government. So in the grand scheme of things, if I were to look at that, the total increase, at least for me, in all of those different parts of the budget, general fund, special funds, and utility funds, is about $25 a month. So I kind of sort of like to look at it that way, rather than all these percentages and rates and figures that can be, conveyed out there, and say, okay, what does that mean in terms of dollars and cents? And to me, it makes it a lot easier to sort of digest that budget and decide, do I want the city spending $9 a year of my $1,400 in taxes to keep the golf course open? Those are the types of questions you have to be able to answer and say whether you want these things or you don't. Not 2 cents.
That was great.
Councilwoman Burnett?
Just one thing, I attended, along with fellow councilwomen, the Boys and Girls Club annual Youth of the Year Dinner Awards. Congratulations again to the Youth of the Year winner, Kaylee Milan. That's why I didn't post on my Facebook. I messed it up. Milan Nando, a South High sophomore who's aspiring to be a cosmetologist. Also, champion of the youth honoree, former Councilwoman Shelley McIntyre, and Employee of the Year, Shaka Burnett. So congratulations to those fine individuals. And also at this event highlighted other accomplishments the club has done. Also gave an update about the new building, which is expected to open this summer. As someone who participated in judging the Youth of the Year event, I'm happy to see that it's still ongoing and that there's kids out here that are making a difference. Thank you.
Councilman Flaherty?
Nothing, I'm just looking forward to going through the budget to see what can be prioritized, and we can make some cuts here and there, but I agree with, Scott. public safety is a big one thing we cannot go cheap on, and if anything, I'm willing to pay for that as well. So I think we'll have some interesting budget discussions the next few weeks, but, you know, I think government has to live within their means, just like the rest of us, and, you know, with inflation going still strong, along with what they might do in Annapolis and here locally, I think it's best to, you know, help the taxpayers as much as possible.
Councilwoman Anderson.
Nothing for me tonight.
Okay, first thing for me was, the reason I asked the question about $2 position and making sure we have a liaison between them. Scott and I have, for the past couple of months, have fielded a fair amount of complaints between, you know, a customer and our department. And by creating this position, I really think, you know, and me asking that question, whether they're going to have an insurance, that way we have something in black and white, that way we have something to stand on, and that way they have something to stand on, and I think that's a really great idea. Second, Janet informed me yesterday, I think, that if I want to be a mayor contest, is statewide. I think there's 11 districts, and out of the 11 districts, there was one child picked from Paramount Elementary School. So, yeah, so, what's that?
It's a district winner.
Yeah, right. And they will be, I think it's April 25th, they'll be going down to meet the governor, as well as the teacher too. So it's really. Yep. Yeah, okay. And last, on Saturday, I went to the Vietnam Veterans Day event at our memorial near the city park. It was a great event. I was able to talk about my father, who spent 2 tours in Vietnam, and it was just a great outpouring of love there, and it was a great event. So,
To your question about having the student in, usually that student is the mayor of the night during regular session, so.
It's usually 2 or 3 or 4 students
Yeah.
that assist with the meeting.
Yep.
be fun. Okay. Do I get a motion to adjourn? I got a second? Any questions on the agenda items tonight? Okay, we're adjourned.